In May 2024, workers in the town of Fujikawaguchiko arrived at a stretch of pavement opposite a dental clinic and began erecting a barrier of black mesh, roughly 20 meters long and 2.5 meters high. It was not there to stop anyone getting through. It was there to block a view. Behind it, framed above the roofline of a Lawson convenience store, was Mount Fuji. 2 months later, on the 1st of July, the prefecture of Yamanashi installed a gate at the 5th station of the Yoshida trail. Every climber now paid 2,000 yen. The number admitted was capped at 4,000 a day. And between 4 in the afternoon and 3 in the morning, unless you could produce a reservation at a mountain hut, the gate was locked. A mountain that people have climbed as an act of worship for more than 1,000 years now has a turnstile and an opening time. Fuji is not a place people have stopped wanting to see. It is the exact opposite. It is the most reproduced image in the history of Japan, and that is not a coincidental fact about the crisis. That is the crisis. Mount Fuji is 3,776 meters high. It is the tallest mountain in Japan by more than 500 meters, and it stands almost entirely alone, rising off a plain rather than out of a range, which is why the shape is so recognizable. There is nothing next to it to give the eye a competing line. It is also not one volcano. It is at least 3, stacked. The oldest, Komitake, sits buried inside the northern flank. On top of that came Kofuji, Old Fuji, and on top of that, beginning roughly 10,000 years ago, the cone that is visible today, Shin Fuji, New Fuji. Everything anyone has ever photographed is the youngest layer of a structure that has been rebuilding itself in the same place for hundreds of thousands of years. It sits where 3 tectonic plates meet. The Eurasian, the Okhotsk, and the Philippine sea plates converge underneath it, and there is no other major volcano on Earth in that position. It has erupted repeatedly throughout recorded Japanese history. The eruption of 864 in the Jogan era poured lava north into a large lake and split it into what are now 3 of the Fuji 5 lakes, and produced the sea of hardened lava that the Aokigahara forest grew on top of. The last eruption began on the 16th of December, 1707. It is known as the Hoi eruption, and it started 49 days after one of the largest earthquakes in Japanese history had struck offshore. It did not come from the summit. It tore open a new vent on the southeastern flank, and that crater is still there, a great scoop taken out of the otherwise perfect cone, visible from the Tokido line. It threw ash roughly 100 kilometers to Ito. Contemporary accounts describe the sky darkening over the shogun's capital in the middle of the day and several centimeters of ash accumulating in the streets. Closer to the mountain, on the Ashigara plain, the ash smothered the farmland entirely. It choked the rivers, which then flooded for years afterwards because the beds had risen. The famine that followed killed people for a decade after the mountain went quiet. It has now been quiet for 318 years. That is the longest silence in its recorded history, and Japanese volcanologists do not regard it as reassuring. In 2021, the local governments revised the official hazard map, extending the projected lava flow zones considerably. Government estimates for a Hoi-scale event today describe ash reaching Tokyo, closing the Shinkansen and Haneda, contaminating water treatment, collapsing roofs under wet ash, and shutting down the electrical grid across the most densely populated region on Earth. Fuji is not a landmark with a cultural significance attached to it. It is a live volcano that 38 million people have built a metropolis underneath. The religion came directly out of that. The earliest shrines associated with the mountain were not built in gratitude. They were built to placate it. Fujisan Hongu Sengen Taisha at Fujinomiya traces its origins to the practice of enshrining the mountain's deity in order to stop it erupting. And the network of Sengen shrines that spread around the base did the same job. The deity is Kono Hana Sakuya Hime, a goddess associated with blossom and with fire. For most of the medieval period, the mountain was climbed by ascetics, mountain priests who went up as a religious discipline, not as recreation. What changed it into a mass practice was a movement that began in the 16th century with an ascetic named Hasegawa Kakugyo and became, by the Edo period, one of the largest popular religious phenomena in Japan. It was called Fujiko. A ko was a confraternity, a group of ordinary townspeople, carpenters, fishmongers, shopkeepers, who pooled money over the course of the year. Each summer, the group sent 2 or 3 of its members to climb the mountain and perform the rites on behalf of everyone who had paid in. The following year, different members went. In Edo, the movement became enormous. There is a stock phrase from the period referring to the 808 KO of Edo, which is not a count, but an idiom meaning too many to number. Guides called oshi housed and fed pilgrims at the base of the mountain and led them up. The town of Fuji Yoshida, at the foot of the Yoshida Trail, still has surviving oshi houses on its main street. 2 details from this period matter enormously to what happens later. The first is that women were forbidden from the summit, the prohibition held until 1872, when the new Meiji government abolished it. In 1832, a woman named Takayama Tatsu climbed disguised as a man, and she is remembered for it precisely because it was not supposed to be possible. The second is the Fujizuka. A Fujizuka is a miniature Mount Fuji. They were built in shrine grounds across Edo from the late 18th century. Mounds of earth a few meters high, faced with real volcanic rock carried down from Fuji itself, with a winding path to the top and a small Sengen shrine at the summit. They existed because most people in Edo would never climb the actual mountain. It was a journey of days. It cost money. It was closed to women. So the city built dozens of small Fujis in its own courtyards, and people climbed those instead, and it counted. There are still several dozen surviving in Tokyo. Some are designated cultural properties. This is the fact underneath everything that follows. 250 years ago, the demand to experience Mount Fuji already exceeded the mountain's capacity to supply it, and the solution the culture arrived at was to make copies. And then came the greatest copy of all. Somewhere around 1830, a printmaker in his 70s began publishing a series of landscapes for the Edo popular market. Katsushika Hokusai's 36 views of Mount Fuji sold well enough that the publisher extended it to 46. The prints were commercial products. They were made in editions of thousands from carved wood blocks, and they sold for roughly what a bowl of noodles cost. They were not art objects in the sense that a painting was. They were affordable pictures for people who wanted something on the wall. The third print in the series shows a wave curling over 3 fishing boats, with the mountains small and distant beneath its crest. Hokusai's Fuji is, in strict terms, frequently wrong. He moves it. He changes its proportion. In several of the views, the mountain occupies a position or a scale it could not occupy from the stated vantage point. It functions as a compositional anchor, a fixed still point that every other element in the picture is arranged against. Utagawa Hiroshige followed with his own Fuji series, and then with the 53 stations of the Tokido, in which the mountain appears repeatedly along the road from Edo to Kyoto. Then, the prints left Japan. The standard account, that they arrived in Europe as packing material around exported ceramics, is probably too neat, but the effect is not in dispute. From the 1860s, Japanese woodblock prints circulated among European artists and dealers and produced the phenomenon that came to be called Japonisme. Monet collected them and hung them in his house at Giverny, where they still are. Van Gogh copied Hiroshige directly in oils. Degas, Manet, Whistler, and Toulouse-Lautrec all absorbed the flattened perspective and the cropped composition. When Debussy published La Mer in 1905, the cover of the first edition carried Hokusai's wave. So by the beginning of the 20th century, the shape of Mount Fuji was one of the most widely disseminated images on the planet, and a substantial proportion of the people who recognized it had no idea it was a real place with an address. Japan then reproduced it domestically at a scale nobody else could match. In 1935, a photographer named Okada Koyo took a picture at Lake Motosu of the mountain and its inverted reflection in still water. That photograph is the basis of the image on the back of the 1,000 yen note. It has been in circulation, in one design or another, for decades through billions of individual banknotes. Add the Shinkansen. From 1964, the fastest train in the world ran along the southern base of the mountain, and on a clear day, every passenger between Tokyo and Osaka got a view from the right-hand window. The railway published timetables noting where to look. By the time a foreign visitor lands at Narita, they have seen Mount Fuji thousands of times. They are not traveling to see a mountain, they are traveling to verify an image they already own. and in the 1990s, Japan tried to get the mountain recognized by UNESCO and was told no. The bid was for Natural World Heritage status. The problem was that the mountain, at close range, was filthy. The trails carried litter that had accumulated over decades of mass climbing. Illegal dumping in the forests around the base had become a serious enough problem that abandoned vehicles and household appliances were being found in the woods. And the huts on the mountain had, for most of their history, discharged human waste directly onto the slope. Climbers had a name for what this produced. They called them the White Rivers, trails of toilet paper running down the mountainside below the huts, preserved by the cold and the altitude. Japan withdrew the application rather than have it refused. What followed was a genuine cleanup, and a large part of it was driven by one person. Noguchi Ken, a mountaineer who had climbed Everest young and had been embarrassed by the amount of Japanese rubbish he found on it, began organizing volunteer cleanup expeditions on Fuji from the turn of the century and kept doing it for years. Bio-toilets were installed at the huts, funded partly by charging climbers to use them. Enforcement against dumping increased. Then Japan changed the category of its application. In June 2013, UNESCO inscribed Fuji not as a natural site, but as a cultural one, under the title, Fujisan, Sacred Place and Source of Artistic Inspiration. Read that a second time. Japan's most famous mountain is a World Heritage Site on the grounds of the pictures people have made of it. The listing does not celebrate the geology. It celebrates the Fujizuka, the Sengen shrines, the pilgrimage routes, Hokusai, and Hiroshige. The mountain was inscribed for being looked at. ICOMOS, the advisory body that assessed the nomination, attached conditions. It asked Japan to produce a visitor management strategy and to address the effect of crowding on the site's character, and it set a deadline for a progress report. The listing was granted anyway. Climber numbers on the 4 trails ran somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 across a season that lasts about 2 months. After 2013, the pressure on the surrounding area went up sharply, and it did so for a reason that has almost nothing to do with the summit. Because most people who come to Mount Fuji never climb it. They come to stand somewhere and look at it, and Japan had spent a century building extraordinarily convenient places to do exactly that. The Fuji Subaru line opened in 1964. It is a toll road, and it climbs to the 5th station of the Yoshida Trail at roughly 2,300 meters. Express buses run there directly from Shinjuku in about 2.5 hours, which means that a person can eat breakfast in central Tokyo and stand at 2,300 meters by early afternoon, having done nothing more strenuous than sit down. Below that, the town of Fujikawaguchiko sits on Lake Kawaguchi with the whole north face in front of it. Above the town, at Arakurayama Sengen Park, stands a 5-story vermilion pagoda with the mountain behind it. The Chureito was built in 1963 as a memorial to the local war dead. It became, in the social media era, one of the single most photographed viewpoints in Asia, reached by a staircase of just under 400 steps. And then there was the convenience store. At some point around 2023, a particular composition began circulating. The flat blue and white signage of a Lawson store, and directly above it, apparently resting on the roof, Mount Fuji. The joke was the collision of the utterly mundane with the utterly iconic. The shot could only be taken from one place, the pavement across the road in front of a dental clinic on a 2-lane highway. But the deeper problem was structural, and it had been ticking from the beginning. Mount Fuji is, for its height, the most accessible major mountain in the developed world, and until 2024, nobody had ever seriously restricted access to it. There was no permit, there was no registration, there was no cap, no equipment check, no proof of fitness, and no compulsory fee. In 2014, the prefectures introduced a conservation contribution of 1,000 yen, and it was voluntary. Payment rates ran well below full compliance. The road takes you to 2,300 meters, so you begin at more than 60% of the altitude, and the entire remaining climb can be done in a single push. The season is 2 months. The huts open in early July and shut in early September, and everything the mountain receives in a year arrives inside that window. And the mountain has 2 owners. The prefectural boundary between Yamanashi and Shizuoka runs across it, Yoshida, the busiest trail by a wide margin, is Yamanashi's. Subashiri, Gotemba, and Fujinomiya are Shizuoka's. For years, the two prefectures ran different rules, different fees, and different messaging on the same mountain because there was no single authority over it. Layer physiology on top of that, 3,776 meters, is comfortably high enough to produce altitude sickness in an unacclimatized person. The standard guidance in mountain medicine is to ascend gradually and sleep low. Going from sea level to 3,776 meters in under 24 hours is close to a textbook description of what not to do. The practice has a name in Japanese, Dongan Tozen, bullet climbing. You take the evening bus from Tokyo, start walking from the 5th station at 9 at night, climb through the dark without sleeping, reach the summit for sunrise, and come straight back down. It is extremely popular because it saves the price of a hut and a night. The summit temperature in August frequently sits near freezing, and the wind on the crater rim is often severe. People arrive there having climbed through the night in shorts and trainers, carrying a plastic convenience store bag. Rescue services on the mountain deal with hypothermia, altitude sickness, falls, and cardiac events every season. There are deaths every year. None of this was hidden. All of it was known, published, and repeatedly warned about. For 11 years after the World Heritage listing, essentially nothing was done about any of it. What that produces physically is the photograph that circulates every August, a line of headlamps in the dark, switchbacking up the upper Yoshida Trail. Hundreds of small white lights, stationary. The congestion is concentrated near the top. The trail narrows on the final approach to the crater rim, and above, about the 8th station, it is walled in by rock on one side and drop on the other. In the 2 or 3 hours before sunrise, when everyone on the mountain is trying to occupy the same 300 vertical meters at the same time, the queue simply stops. People stand still at 3,500 meters in near freezing wind for a long time. It is not only uncomfortable. A packed trail is a dangerous trail because rock dislodged from above has nowhere to go and no gaps to fall through, and Fuji's surface is loose volcanic scree. The huts, meanwhile, are not hotels. There are around 40 on the Yoshida route. The standard arrangement is a raised platform where climbers sleep in rows, shoulder to shoulder, in allocated widths measured in tens of centimeters. In peak season, they sell out well in advance. The people who could not get a hut climbed through the night instead, which is precisely why the queue formed at 3 in the morning. And when the sun came up, everybody turned around and went down the same mountain at the same time. Down at the bottom, a town of about 25,000 people was receiving millions. Fujikawaguchiko is not a resort city. It is a municipality on the north shore of Lake Kawaguchi, formed by mergers of smaller villages, with a permanent population smaller than a London suburb. It has a 2-lane main road. The Lawson problem, described precisely, went like this. Visitors stood in the roadway of a national highway to get the alignment right. They climbed onto the balcony and roof of the dental clinic opposite, which was a private medical building with patients inside it. They parked across the clinic's car park. They dropped litter and cigarette ends. When staff came out to ask them to move, the situation frequently did not improve because a substantial share of the people involved did not speak Japanese and did not intend to stay long enough for it to matter. The town escalated in stages, signs first, then multilingual signs, then a security guard. In April and May of 2024, it put up the mesh screen. The response was immediate, international, and largely framed as absurd, a town blocking the view of its own mountain. Within days, holes had been cut in the barrier. It came down in August that year, taken off ahead of typhoon season winds, and the argument about whether to put it back rolled on into the following year. The barrier is not really the story, though. The barrier is the symptom. The story is a bus network in a town of 25,000 that cannot carry its own residents in August. It is illegal parking on farm access roads. It is a staircase of 400 steps at a war memorial with a 2-hour queue at the top. It is a clinic that had to install a barrier to keep people off its roof. And it is a question that nobody in the town has been able to answer because it has no answer under Japanese law. You can charge people to climb a mountain. You can cap the number who enter a trail. You can close a road and you can shut a car park. You cannot charge admission to a view. And there is one more thing about having 300,000 people a season on that particular mountain, which is almost never discussed in the tourism debate at all. In 2023, the central and local governments published a revised evacuation plan for a Mount Fuji eruption. Its most widely reported provision was a change of instruction. Under the earlier plan, residents in much of the affected area were to evacuate by car. The revised plan told most of them to walk because roads covered in even a few centimeters of volcanic ash become impassable. Ash clogs air intakes, and wet ash is closer to setting cement than to snow. Traffic would not move. Roughly 750,000 people fall within the zones covered by the plan. Now hold that alongside the other set of facts. On a peak weekend in August, several thousand people are strung out along a single track on the upper cone of that volcano. There is one way up and effectively one way down each trail. Descent from the summit to the fifth station takes a fit person around 3 hours. The fifth station is served by a single toll road. Japanese volcanologists have been explicit that Fuji shows no current signs of imminent eruption, and there is a monitoring network on the mountain designed to give warning. But the shape of the exposure is worth stating plainly, because the tourism conversation almost never does. Japan has spent 11 years marketing an active stratovolcano as a photograph, and it built the visitor infrastructure long before it built the plan for getting anybody off it. By 2024, the prefectures had run out of room to keep doing nothing. Yamanashi moved first. From the 1st of July 2024, the Yoshida Trail got a physical gate at the fifth station, a compulsory charge of 2,000 yen, a daily cap of 4,000 climbers, and a closure between 4 in the afternoon and 3 in the morning for anyone without a hut booking. The overnight closure was aimed squarely at bullet climbing. The following season, the regime tightened again. Yamanashi raised the charge substantially and folded the old voluntary contribution into it. Shizuoka, which had held out with a voluntary system on its 3 trails, introduced a compulsory fee of its own and added a requirement that climbers complete a short safety course and register before setting out. For the first time in its history, the 2 prefectures were running comparable rules on the same mountain. There has been serious discussion of going much further. The governor of Yamanashi has for years promoted replacing the Subaru line buses with a light rail line to the 5th station, a system that would allow the number of people arriving at the trailhead to be controlled precisely by the simple mechanism of running fewer trains. It is expensive, it is contested locally, and it has not been built. Some of it is working. Climber numbers on Yoshida came down after the gate went in. The overnight closure reduced the worst of the bullet climbing. The queues in 2024 and 2025 were reported as noticeably better than the years before, and the fundamentals have not moved. The 4,000 cap sits above the historical average daily figure, so it clips the peak days rather than reducing the season. The yen is still weak. Japan's national visitor targets still point upward. The Chuo Expressway still runs to Kawaguchiko, the pagoda still has 400 steps, and the Shinkansen still passes the south face twice an hour. Above all, the overwhelming majority of the people who come to Mount Fuji are not climbers, and never were. They are standing in a town at the bottom with a phone, and every measure introduced so far applies to the trail. Japan spent 2 centuries teaching the world what this mountain looks like. It succeeded more completely than any nation has ever succeeded at anything of the kind. That is not a failure of policy. It is the policy working. Take the first bus to the 5th station in August and you arrive at 2,300 meters to find a shopping street, vending machines, a post box that stamps mail with an altitude postmark, restaurants, a shrine, a car park full of coaches, and several hundred people in the mist, most of whom are not going any higher. Walk up in the afternoon and the trail is fine. Walk up at midnight and you join the line. Come down to Kawaguchiko and go and stand at the crossing outside the Lawson at 6 in the morning before the tour buses, and you will find the shot is genuinely good. The mountain does sit on the roof. There are painted marks on the road surface now, and signage, and on some mornings a guard. Go up the 400 steps to the Churredo, and there is a viewing platform with a designated queue and a sign asking people not to stand on the walls, and a war memorial that most of the people photographing it do not know is a war memorial. and then go back to Tokyo, to Taito Ward, and find the shrine at Shitaya. In the courtyard, between the apartment blocks, there is a mound about 4 meters high. It is made of black volcanic rock, carried down from Mount Fuji by hand and piled up here in 1828 by members of a Fujiko confraternity so that the people of the neighborhood, the ones who could not afford the journey and the women who were forbidden the summit, could climb Fuji at home and have it count. There are stone steps up the side and a handrail. There is a small shrine at the top. It takes about 20 seconds to climb. On most days, nobody does.